Hey, this is Matt Vojek, and this is the Creating Business Podcast. Each episode, I sit down and talk to a guest from the creative industries of advertising and marketing about work they've done for a business and their thought process behind all their decisions. By digging deep into projects and the decisions made, we unearth new insights and ideas about creating amazing work that moves the needle for businesses. This is the Creating Business Podcast. All right, so I am here with Ryan Scott of Bonifier. Am I saying that right?
Close.
How do you say it?
Bonifier.
Bonifier.
Remember, pretentious French.
All right, I can do that. So the first question, let's dive right in here. Tell me about Bonifier. Bonifier.
All right. Well,
What is it exactly?
So it's a company. It's a startup, and our mission is to improve the pediatric patient experience, right? And that can, play out in a myriad of different ways. Right now, we're working on our first product, which is currently being called PIP. And PIP's more defined mission is to alleviate the fear, the anxiety, and the loneliness that kids living with a life-altering illness are experiencing.
Nice. So, I guess can you tell us about how you even came up to this idea? What? I mean, you don't have to go all the way back again, but was there a certain moment where you were like, okay, this is something that I need to do?
I would say there were a lot of little mini moments, right, that led up to where I am today. I wouldn't say there was ever a defining moment where I'm like, all right, well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there kind of have been, right? But really, when I kind of look back now, it's always been these just baby steps, right? Baby steps into the unknown, or baby steps into something I thought I knew. In some ways, you could look back and say it kind of all started last year at Startup Weekend in February. I was encouraged to go and present an idea that I had been working on, but if you take a step back, the fact that I had been working on that idea was really kind of the genesis of all of it. My background before founding this company, the previous 5 years, I've been running a very specialized video production company called YibiView, and we created 360-degree video, basically designed a way in which to do that before really anybody else was doing it commercially. Had a patent pending and all that kind of fun stuff. Got to do some really cool things for clients that I cared about. We had Subaru, Toyota, everything was all big national stuff. We didn't do anything locally. And during all of that, we back up even further. I used to work in ad agencies, and some people I knew from back in the day contacted me and said, hey, we see what you're doing, and we have this idea of creating 360-degree content for kids who are receiving treatment for cancer. Would you be willing to partner with us on this? So, yeah, absolutely. We went and shot a prototype, and it turned out really good. And they went and pitched it, and it, they let it die, essentially. But what was cool about that is it really kind of sparked this idea, which had been already germinating, right? I had come to the point in my career where I had checked off a lot of boxes. A couple years ago at Making Midwest Fest, I did that talk, and that was kind of what it was about. But that was really just the beginning. It was the beginning of this turning point to where I am now and where I'm going now. But after that talk, I kind of was able to check off the rest of the boxes. I had worked with clients I cared about. I had done a ton of firsts. We could hang our hats saying we were the first to do this, and this, and kind of all this kind of stuff that fed my ego. But I was getting to the point where it was just feeling hollow, right? There had to be more. There had to be something that meant something. And I'm one of these people that I kind of only have one speed, very type A, just gonna go straight at the wall until we bust through it. And I was getting frustrated because I just wasn't finding fulfillment in the work, but I couldn't slow work down, right? I couldn't make myself not do stuff. So I was just getting upset that I was working so hard on stuff I didn't care about. But when this presented itself, it kind of turned. I'm like, okay, I could take all this hard work and the sweat and everything else and put it towards something that means something beyond helping sell a widget or, something like that. And then I don't know how far you want to go back, but
keep going.
you kind of know our history where my wife and I have 4 daughters, and our second daughter, when my wife was pregnant with her, we learned that she had a very severe congenital heart defect. And so we lived her entire life at Nationwide Children's down the street. And that never leaves you, right? Like that's always there. And one of the things that just struck me while we were there was that, no matter how bad of a day we were having on any given day, if you hopped in the elevator and went downstairs to grab a coffee or hit the subway in the basement or whatever, there was always people that you would pass who were having a worse day. And that just never left me. And so that was always in the back of my mind. And I'm like, I wish there was some way I could do something. And so like all of that just kind of culminated when we did this pilot. And I was really, really irritated when they just completely dropped the ball on it. Because I thought like, oh, this is it, right? This is what I've been being groomed for. This is what is in place for me to do. And, so I kept doing what I was doing, kept, doing stuff for Subaru and whatever else. But we were working on the motorsports side, so it was very cyclical. By October, there was not much going on. And so in October of, what would that have been? 17, I guess. Yeah. I just started working out in coffee shops, trying to figure out how I could take kind of this proof of concept and make it work. And I had met some random people, and one of the guys I met, I'm actually getting coffee with after this. He encouraged me to go to Startup Weekend, and so I took that idea. And so in some ways you could say that's where it really all started. It had 7 different starts.
Yeah. So you've started 2 businesses basically at this point, right?
Well, more than that, I guess. So before UBView, I was a freelance. Well, I did the same thing you do. I did video editing, motion graphics, all that kind of stuff for probably 7 or 8 years. And kind of towards the tail end of that is when I spun up UBView. And then that was around for 4.5, 5 years. And then kind of the overlap of the creation of Bonifier. So
I guess, is there similarities in kind of how you started both of these, or UBView and Bonifier? Is there similarities in how you started them, and if there was any differences, what were they?
Like knee-jerk reaction.
Not like super like in details, like, oh, I had different spreadsheets. I don't want to know.
Yeah, my knee-jerk reaction would be like, no, they're completely different. But actually, I guess when I think about it for a second, the thing that was similar is that I saw an opportunity, right? Or I saw a need. And it was one of these, like, it just kind of came to me. I'm like, this is obvious. Why are we not doing this? So like with UBView, it was the perfect timing in that, I had this video background. I was also racing. I had access to people who were racing at a professional level, and, being behind the scenes in some of those events, plus my video knowledge. There was a new form of motorsports, and I really hate buzzwords, right? And they come out and they're talking how innovative they are and everything else. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, you're not. Okay, you've changed the format a little bit. It's all about the so-called millennials, right? That apparently have no attention span at all, right? So short form racing, lots of action, lots of crashing, jumps, all kinds of, chaos. But what I noticed was that they were packaging it the same way they've packaged motorsports since the dawn of the video camera, right? A handful of stationary cameras positioned around the track, maybe some handhelds. You got a production truck where some dude's cutting edits and everything, and that's how they're sending the video out to these so-called millennials, and they're going to somehow be more excited about it. And I'm like, no, wait, we have these small cameras. Wow, there's so much action, you could never capture all of it. You're always going to miss something. But what if we could see all the angles at all the time, right? No longer are you relying on a guy on a production truck. You're giving them all the feeds, and you're giving them control of the camera like we've all grown up with playing video games. You can look anywhere you want at any time, and how is that going to change the paradigm of viewership? It's going to be awesome. And nobody was doing that. So I set out, And I literally drew it on a napkin at a race and gave it to one of our crew guys who had a 3D printer. And I'm like, draw this up in CAD and make it for me and send it to me. And so he did. And then, fast forward, there's a bunch of other stuff that happened. But that's how that all started. And then in the same vein, like if you look at Bonifier, there's been a lot of small pivots and stuff, but we've kind of uncovered this need that no one is really addressing the way we are. I mean, there's tons of people and entities out there that are trying to do good, that are doing good. But when we started exploring, one of the things at these startup events is that, they have you look at your competitors and analyze them and, how are you different and all this kind of thing. What's your key differentiator going to be? And one of the things that we noticed, and it was a flaw with my initial pitch, was that at the end of the day, when you laid them all on the table, everything was a distraction technique. Whether it's bringing puppies in to hang out with the kids, or it's volunteers coming in and playing video games or reading to the kids or whatever. Like, those are all awesome, right? But at the end of the day, they're all essentially distraction techniques. They're taking they're taking the child away from the uncomfortable reality of being sick at that moment and transporting them in some way, which is what we were going to do with that 360 video, right? That was the whole premise. But our mission is to actually address and alleviate the fear, the anxiety, and the loneliness. So to do that, it's not just about distracting them, it's about kind of trying to help them through that fear and anxiety. So that's kind of the commonality, is seeing a problem and finding maybe a different way to look at it than other people are approaching it. Differences, there's tons of differences, right? My entire life, I've always been some sort of maker, right? Some sort of quote unquote creative, traditional creative, right? Whether it's drawing or it's, shooting or editing video or whatever else. It's always been a service-based company or offering, right? Right now, what I find myself doing is building a product. I had never built a product before. Like, I was always the product. So in that sense, it's radically different. And there's a big learning curve. But fortunately, there's a lot of really good product people here in town.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess let's go to Startup Weekend.
Yeah.
So going into that, you have this idea. I mean, you knew that you were going to stand up in front of people and pitch this idea. Did you know that?
That's how it works.
Yeah. So, how did you feel about this idea now, where you're like, all right.
Well, so I'm not big on standing in front of people and talking. I have no problem. I could sit here for hours talking to you, talking to a group of 6-8 people.
Yep.
I don't know if it's just the act of actually standing up and presenting, but there's something there that's just not the most comfortable thing in the world. But I'm able to overcome that when there's a bigger purpose, and I'm also very competitive. So if I'm going to get up and do it, I'm going to try to give it my all. That said, I knew nothing really about the startup ecosystem when I went to Startup Weekend. When I look back at it, or look at it now, the startup world is really like a sport, right? It has its own set of rules. It's got its own playbook. It's got its own way that things work. I didn't know that at the time. My background was always in the agency world, and how you would present at an agency. And so they give you 60 seconds to do your initial pitch, and my initial pitch was very much like what you would do with an agency. It did not follow the actual formula that they have for the startup pitches. And so we go there, and there's all these people, and they're telling us how the day is going to work, and they have this outline for how your pitch should be structured. Yeah. And I look at it and I look at mine, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. And so there's this dilemma. Do I very quickly on the fly edit it, or I just roll with what I got? And I think I cut some stuff because I was afraid it was going to be too long. Yeah. Which I was, even after I cut stuff, I went over. But apparently whatever I said resonated with people. And so here's the other thing with Startup Weekend is you go and you pitch. It is what it is, not a big deal. And then afterwards, everybody comes back and they vote on the pitches. But they don't just vote on their own merit. You actually have to go out and get people to vote, right?
Yeah.
So everybody, it's just like this chaos. It's like a trading room floor, right? Where everybody's like, vote for me, and
Yeah.
I hate that stuff.
Real quick, what's the prize at the end of this weekend?
Honestly, I don't even remember.
Was it cash or was it
I really don't
something
remember.
else?
I don't remember what they.
Yeah.
I don't think they. Maybe they gave out cash. I know you got like different tiers of like support services and that sort of thing.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, startup weekend, I don't remember if there was cash. I know like at the end of Give Back Hack, there was a pretty good sized pool of money that everybody was fighting for.
Yeah. So going into that, you're more or less looking for some kind of validation to your idea, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Validation and just help, right? So I had been working on this, spinning my wheels since like October, and this is February. And I knew, I was about to get really busy with race season again here in a matter of a month or two. And I wanted to see if this thing was going to have any legs. And I felt trapped. I had never done any of this stuff before. I had this idea. I didn't know how to move it forward. I didn't know what I needed to do. I didn't know who I needed to talk to. I didn't know like all these resources existed at that time. So I just went in and did it. And I'm really thankful that I did. So yeah, there's, I don't know, I think 74 pitches that night.
Wow.
Yeah. And they selected 14. Mine was one that got selected, and it's selected by everybody else that's in that room, right? You have to go and they put little stickers on your sheet. Mm-hmm. And I had that day 9 people that I didn't know like join me to work on it.
Wow.
So it was pretty cool.
So these 9 people, then they walk up and they're like, hey, we want to help you with this idea.
Yep. Yeah, essentially. And so then we kind of sat down and we're like, all right, what are we going to do? And those weekends are nice because they give you some sort of structure in that, hey, you need to get out and you need to validate the problem, right? Go out and talk to customers, talk to people, find people who have this pain, and you want to prove or disprove, your hypotheses. Mm-hmm. And what was really great is those 9 people, there are certain things that I just hate doing, right? And I found that in that group of 9 people, there were people there that absolutely loved doing the stuff that I hated. And where I'm like, I hate to ask you this, but would you be willing to go? And they're like, oh yeah, this is, I love that. I'm like, oh, awesome. But it was really cool. And so one of the things I think I did right on that weekend is I came in with an idea, and the idea pivoted a little bit, right? But what I did come in with was a pretty solid mission. And so the very first day, so you pitch Friday evening, and then everybody comes back early Saturday morning and gets to work. That Saturday morning, I put the mission on, like this whiteboard. And throughout that weekend, as we were making decisions, as we were, calling through all the data, we just kept throwing it back at that mission. Mm-hmm. And, the mission has shifted ever so slightly. But the product itself has evolved a great amount. And I think having that mission was a huge value.
Yeah. So then, so you take your team now, and then you do another pitch at the end. Is that how that worked?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, you spend all day Saturday working, talking to people. Like we talked to, 45 or more different patients, parents, healthy kids, mm-hmm. Different clinicians, whether it's nurses, doctors, whatever, admins in different hospitals, to, kind of see where everything was, were our assumptions correct on this, and just how does this whole thing work? And again, we analyzed the competition and all of that. And then, at the end, you put together a presentation of everything you've learned. We also built a very basic prototype. Mm-hmm. So the initial idea was to create an AR, an augmented reality product that would help kids and their families when they first receive a diagnosis. So the idea being that kids don't have any power or control, right? You have kids, you understand that, like, being a kid, mom and dad are always telling you what you can and can't do. Well, it's that much worse when you have some sort of major illness, because you have a whole other layer of people that tell you what you can't do, right? Nurses, doctors, and everything else. And it's especially receiving that initial diagnosis, it's a very scary time. And so the idea was that we build this AR suite, essentially, of apps. So like wayfinding through the hospital the first time they get there, so the child gets there and they get this tablet and they can select their favorite character, and that character leads them through the hospital to their waiting room. And while they're there in the waiting room, they can open up portals on the wall and all this other stuff to keep them distracted, right? And then the same thing in the doctor's office. but again, we had this mission. The mission was to improve and to improve the pediatric patient experience. So you could say in some ways the distraction techniques, that helps them, right? You could, yeah, that's helpful. It gives the kids some control and takes some of the burden off the parents. But when we actually started talking to kids, that's when we found, yes, there's definitely fear involved. There's definitely anxiety throughout the treatment. And then the thing that really caught us off guard that I wasn't expecting was this common thread of loneliness, both like the traditional form of loneliness, like you're alone, right? Mom and dad have to stuff to work, stuff to care for siblings, all that sort of thing. And so there are large portions of time where as a child you are alone in the hospital, or the medication or the treatments that you're on wake you up in the middle of the night. You're left there alone when no one else is really around. And we kind of tell the story around this boy we met we'll call him Noah. He's 12 now, and he's had cancer for the last 3 years, and he has this really kind of an ideal family scenario where mom and dad are still married. He has several siblings. They live in a smaller community here in Central Ohio that is like really engaged, and for what he's got going on, it's kind of ideal. It's awesome. But even he experiences loneliness, and he shared with us he's really only alone 4 or 5 hours out of any given day. And when we talked to the doctors, they were kind of amazed by that, because most kids are alone for well over 12 hours a day. And so if you're alone even at 4 or 5, how much worse is it for these other children? But then there's the other side of loneliness, the sense of isolation, where in Noah's case, he has a loving family, he has a community and friends and everybody rallying around him, this great support system. But at the end of the day, he's isolated in that no one else really knows exactly what he's going through, can't really relate. And so he's isolated in his experience, even though he's surrounded by smiling, happy, loving people. And as we talked to other children, we found, that this loneliness was a common thread. So, the mission being now, okay, we want to address the fear, the anxiety, and the loneliness. And what I initially pitched didn't do any of that. It was just a distraction technique. And when we looked at all the different competitors, that was the same thing. So you've got, different entities using VR. You've got, again, like puppies and volunteers and all this other great stuff. But it's all distraction. And so we really pivoted that weekend and kind of threw everything on the table, and we're like, all right, how do you address fear, anxiety, loneliness? How can we alleviate this for kids? And the research pointed us to cognitive behavioral therapy, and we did some more research and found like how effective it is. It's there's tons of research that shows how effective it is. And we're like, all right, it's great, but we don't, like, how are we going to do this? We can't hire, thousands more psychologists and put them in the hospitals. So we kind of netted out building a digital friend for these kids who we could train to be able to deploy these different types of CBT. And so then for that weekend, what we ended up doing, we couldn't build out that whole thing. So we ended up building out a character that would embody that friend. And we made like a little AR presentation. And so I think we called him AJ at the time. So it was this little character, we used Unreal, or is it Unreal? Doesn't matter. One of the game engines. Yeah. And threw some animation cycles on him and everything else, which was fun because that takes me back to my background in teaching 3D and all that. And so we had this little animated character that would dance and whatever else, and we could cast him into the room with you. So like your buddy could sit there with you and everything. And so that's what we presented. We didn't win. We didn't even get like top 3. Yeah. And as a very competitive person, I was upset by that. But we did get like audience choice, so our peers voted us like top. Yeah, nice. And I'm really glad that we didn't win, because as I sat there listening to the teams that did win and just kind of like shaking my head, it caused me to really look at like, okay, where were we deficient? Where can we be better? How could I present better? How could we make this more clear for the judges and all? It was a great learning experience. Yeah,
that's always the thing about winning, is that like there's less to learn from winning than losing. I don't know. I've always been like that my entire life, where like I don't know, my kids, my nieces, they lose things and I'm like, yes, right. Like let's see what happens, and then they're like really upset. I'm like, no, like this is an amazing thing. Like, you get to try to figure out where to go from here. I don't know. To me, that's amazing.
It is, and it's a lot easier when I'm teaching my children than that. Rather, I mean, if it's myself, I'd much rather just win.
You're like, oh no, I already get the lessons. Let's just get the win now.
But no, you're right. Yeah. You have all those teachable moments.
Yeah.
With your kids, and it's awesome to be like, especially now where I think our culture has shifted to where there's this whole like fail fast, fail often sort of thing.
Yeah.
And being able to teach kids like it's okay that I just whooped you at Uno, right? What can we learn from this? Other than Daddy always keeps cards up his sleeve, like there's a valuable life lesson there. But yeah, it's one of the great things about having kids is being able to see kind of both sides.
Yeah. So then leaving Startup Weekend, I'm sure there was a little bit of disappointment and a little bit of kind of happiness at the same time.
I would say there was much more happiness, right? Like there was the initial like, oh, we didn't win.
Mm-hmm.
But I came out of that weekend on such a high.
Mm-hmm.
It was awesome. And, so the initial like validation of my idea, again, the idea changed and shifted a lot, but I felt like where we landed was so much more solid than where we started. So that was a win. The fact that it was an idea that resonated with strangers, that was good. I had never been able to really work on a team like that before either, especially in the last, I don't know, like 10 years, like as a freelancer. I mean, I would farm work out with people and stuff, but most of the time I was kind of working in a silo. When I ran my own company, I was fortunate in that I was able to essentially just hire my friends, but there wasn't like this big, huge, diverse pool of people I was working with all the time. And that weekend, it really I got to kind of dip my toe in the water of like working with people that were completely different than me, which was awesome. And seeing like what we could accomplish. Because again, if I just, you only know your own experience. And I'm like, I hate this, and this. I assume everyone else hates this, and this. And you find out like, no, for some people it's the exact opposite. They thrive in that sort of environment. And it's not mean of me to ask them to go do something I don't like to do, because that's actually the thing they love to do and that they're skilled at. And so it just kind of opened up my eyes to like, wow, like we can get so much done so quickly if you build the right team.
Yeah. And
also then I had to do this like crash course on reading like every leadership book I could find, and like I don't know anything about anything.
Yeah. Okay, so we kind of talked over some of the other questions that I had here, but maybe you can add something to some of these. I guess at what point then did you decide, okay, maybe it's time to stop doing UberView and start doing Bonifier?
There wasn't ever a day where I sat down and thought that. It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
Right? So I knew the writing was on the wall with UberView. That industry is kind of drying up a little bit anyway, so I knew that. I also knew that we were very segmented in our market, and that we were kind of pigeonholed in motorsports, and that work was largely going to dry up because our value prop all along was that we were the absolute best, right? I mean, there was nobody. We were first mover status, right? So we had way more experience than everybody else, way more high stress experience. You only get one opportunity to shoot the final at X Games. They're not going to like rerun it for you if you screw something up, right? So you better mind your P's and Q's and get it right. That said, that industry, the marketing departments of those teams and stuff, they want to turn footage as quickly as possible, right? It needs to stay relevant to whatever's going on. And the cameras are getting better and better to where the cameras and someone who didn't have as much experience as us could get 80% of the quality that we could produce, but you could do it at a much more rapid pace. And so like that was going to eat away at our value prop. Mm-hmm. And I had made some mistakes along the way where I didn't grow the business as quickly as I should have and expand into other markets. So I knew that may kind of dry up. So essentially what happened is, I still own UberView. I still have the equipment. I still have all the expertise and still have the contacts and all of that. So like if someone calls tomorrow like, hey, we need to go do X, well, we'll go do it, right? It's not a big deal. So essentially what happened then is just every day I would just take a baby step forward with this idea, it used to be called Brave Buddy. And I would figure out, okay, what's the best thing I can do today to move this forward? And I would do that, and I would do that, and I would do that. And then, periodically look up and go, okay, is there anything going on that I need to do? I need to pursue with UBView. How are our savings doing? How are we going to pay bills?
Yeah.
But then, next day, put your head back down and just keep moving forward and forward and forward. And that's really how it's been all along.
Yeah. Okay, so a few more questions here. I guess since you've started doing this, and I think you've kind of already talked about it a little bit, but is there any just huge things that you've just kind of learned along the way, or any big changes that you've had in the direction, as far as Bonifier goes, outside of Startup Weekend we talked about. So kind of moving forward from there, has there been any more kind of big moments of validation or big changes in direction or anything like that?
Okay. Well, yeah. So Startup Weekend was just start. A few, I guess it would have been a month and a half after that, was Give Back Hack, which is very similar in structure and form to Startup Weekend, except that all the ideas that are pitched during Give Back Hack have to have some sort of social impact, which is awesome. So every idea that's pitched is in some way meant to basically better the world, and that can play out in a myriad of different ways, whether it's helping the homeless or expecting mothers, or you name it. And so what's really the other big difference between Startup Weekend and Give Back Hack is that Startup Weekend, you have to come with with an idea that you've never worked on, right? It's just that, it's an idea. Mm-hmm. Whereas Give Back Hack allows you to bring, essentially, they call them pre-vetted ideas. So we essentially took what we left Startup Weekend with and submitted that as a pre-vetted idea to Give Back Hack. They accepted it, and then I had to go and do the same thing at Startup Weekend. I had to do everything all over again. I had to do the 60-second pitch. I had to go round up votes. I had to put together a team together. And at the end of that, we were one of 4 winners, and there was money at the end of that one, right? Yeah. So that was big validation, because not only was I able to attract different team members, I was able to convince the funders, who are no joke, right? These are people from the United Way, the Columbus Foundation, IGS. These are not dumb people that just throw money around. We were able to convince them that this was an idea worth pursuing and worth putting some money behind. So that was a big win in my book. Mm-hmm. Plus, we moved so far forward during that weekend with the new team and with a more with a tighter focus on the mission. After that, literally the week after that, we got accepted into an accelerator, the Sea Change Accelerator, which is the social enterprise accelerator. And so that was nice because it kept our feet on the ground and kept our feet to the fire essentially for 13 weeks and carried us into mid-August. At the end of that is another big pitch event, and that one's for a lot more money. So Give Back Hack, I think there was $20,000 that would be split up among winning teams. Mm-hmm. There was a little over $100,000 at Sea Change. And so we went, and it's a long program. It's a long time to keep everybody together. And you're continuing to try to push PIP forward at that point, while at the same time doing all this coursework and everything else that you need to do over here. But we won a large amount of money at Sea Change, at Sea Change. Mm-hmm. So that was another big validation. We haven't really pivoted a lot. The mission is still there. The idea of building this digital friend for kids is still there. I would say the big change now is that I've made the realization, it's taken me really too long to figure this out, but everything that we're kind of aspiring to and that we've been pitching has been kind of a 5-year vision, right? That's going to take a lot of time, a lot of expertise, and a good chunk of money to build out. I don't have a 5-year personal runway. I don't have bank accounts flush with money to pay that kind of expertise and everything at this point. And that's not the right way to build it anyway, right? Mm-hmm. We need to build something now that we can get in the hands of kids and see if it works. To constantly iterate, to constantly check our hypotheses and make sure that we're on the right track. We could spend millions of somebody's dollars and spend 5 years and build this thing and find out that we're totally wrong. So to that end, I actually went and built the thing. So starting in December, I built a very primitive version of PIP. So what I did essentially was that, one of the natural results of a child using PIP was that a psychologist or someone within the child's care team would have an ongoing assessment of how that child is doing emotionally, right? That's just the natural result of the kid talking to PIP all the time. We have all that data. And we just kind of build that as like, hey, this is a nice feature. It just naturally occurs. Well, as I was trying to figure out, okay, what is the minimal product I can build right now that would provide the most amount of value to both the children and their care team, and that's kind of where I netted out. When we tell the story, the problem that we're trying to fix is that if you just look at children treated as an inpatient, in the U.S. there are 1.7 million kids each year treated as an inpatient, but only less than a third receive any sort of clinical mental health treatment or support while receiving treatment for their physical diagnosis. So that means more than 1.1 million kids are left alone to basically deal with the fears and the emotions that stem from living with that physical diagnosis. And that's pretty heavy, right? And it's not because the hospitals don't care or the clinicians don't care or we don't care about our kids. That's not it at all. There's the issue being that there's a finite number of psychologists, right? And we kind of looked at this, from a practical standpoint, like what does this look like? And one of the problems I see is that the way the system works now is that there's a fixed point in time assessment, right? So you receive let's say a diagnosis for leukemia. Well, we're going to schedule you to come in tomorrow at 2:00 and sit down with a psychologist and do a mental health assessment. So, your parents bring you in, you sit down, you go through this assessment, and at the end, so at 2:00 on Tuesday, they run you through this, and guess what? You did not check off enough boxes. You are not clinically depressed. And so your parents leave and they're all happy because, well, poor Matt has leukemia, but at least he's not depressed today. But what about in a few weeks or a few months or a year into treatment? How are you then? When you've been out of school, you've not been seeing your friends, you physically feel ill, maybe your hair's falling out, like all this different stuff that plays out. Those kids aren't being reassessed. They don't get reassessed until, there's some very obvious symptoms that something's going on, right? And at that point, there's damage already done. So these kids are like falling through the cracks. So essentially what I've done then is we've created a very basic assessment tool that these kids go and talk to PIP every day and essentially self-report how they're feeling. And we capture all of those emotions, and then we can give them to the child psychologist or their care team. There's a lot of, if you just look at the numbers, 2/3 of these kids never see a psychologist. So like there's nowhere to collect that data. No one would ever see that. But there's a psychologist who we chat with at Children's, and she painted us this picture of a child who has, let's say, sickle cell. And, she can treat 22 patients a week, but then occasionally she's on call. And so if you just look at the numbers, there's a good chance that if she gets called in while she's on call, that's not her patient, right? It's a patient of a colleague, or it's a child that no one is seeing right now. He's part of that 2/3. And so when she goes in to see this child, and he has sickle cell, he's in a pain episode, right? So just excruciating pain. Well, she has to build some form of rapport with this child before he'll trust her and kind of go along with the treatment. Well, you can imagine that's going to take a while for any sort of adult-child relationship that are strangers, but especially so if the child is in excruciating pain. So that may take 5, 10, 15, I don't know how long that takes, but that's all time that the child is in pain before she can ever actually start to administer some sort of treatment. And then she doesn't know this child, right? So she's a rock star, but she really just has to, lob a softball and hope that he hits it, like it works, right? Well, in the scenario, that's status quo. That's how it works now, right? What if that child had a PIP, right? So when he first gets his diagnosis, he has a PIP, and he's been conversing with PIP for however long, several months. Now she gets that call. She can log into this child's dashboard, and she can see actual data on him, right? And see that, when he's had these anxiety periods or these pain periods before, doing this particular CBT strategy has worked really well for him. So now all that time that's currently being used to build rapport is gone because the child already has rapport built with PIP. So she can use PIP to intervene and deploy that type of CBT that she already knows is most effective for that particular child. So the idea being that this is a support tool for the care team. Like, in no way are we trying to, replace psychologists. We're trying to give them tools to help them, provide better treatment and faster treatment. So I built this thing from December and started testing it on my own children.
Yeah.
And built the tech platform and everything around it the beginning part of this year to where we can actually have people test it. So that's where it's at now. So now we're going to try to get just regular people to test it, and so we can iterate and see what works and what doesn't, and what type of conversation works best with, this age range of children versus this, and then like finding that perfect balance of that tension of making it to where kids want to use it, but not to where, they're trying to talk to PIP all day, every day, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to create something that creates an addiction. I'm semi-anti-Facebook, right?
Yeah.
We're not trying to replace people. We're just trying to create a tool to help them live better.
Yeah. I think that's amazing, man. I mean, the big reason that I wanted you to be on this first one is because I guess just how easy it is to support the idea that you have here. And as somebody that's kind of seen some of the progress of this, going back, I guess 4 years now, something like that.
Yeah.
So seeing you kind of like excited about, your other business, and then all of a sudden, like, some stuff's happening. You can tell that there's some stuff happening with you where you're like, I want to tell stories. And like, it seemed like you were trying to tell stories with doing that stuff, but you weren't kind of satisfied enough with that.
Yeah, it didn't really fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you kept going, and I didn't see it coming where you would end up kind of going with it. But I think that's just, I don't know, like, just seeing it from the outside, I think it's just an awesome progression, from going from this thing that you liked very much to this thing that you love very much. And I think in the way that you talk about it, it's very clear, like, that you are super confident on this path that you are going on. And you're not confident that you know the answers, but you're confident that you're on the right path anyway.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, I won't say every day, but I definitely wake up and go, what am I doing? Right? Because I'm not a clinician, right? Yeah. This is not my background. Like, my skill set lies in that somehow I'm able to apparently see things other people don't see, and I'm stubborn enough or stupid enough to like keep pushing forward. But it's been really interesting because I'm deficient in so many areas, but people just keep popping up that are skilled in that area. And I don't know if it's this way everywhere, like across the world or across our country, but holy crap, like in Columbus, people are awesome. Like, I can just reach out to people and be like, I'm working on this. I know nothing about this. Can you help me know something, right?
Yeah.
Or can you put me in touch with the right person? And I've had people in very high positions that don't know me from Adam, like meet me for coffee, and it's been really awesome. So, I don't know if I think a lot of it has to do too with just the mission, right? This is something that anybody can get behind. If I were trying to create another used car dealership, maybe people wouldn't be so helpful, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, people have been really cool.
That's amazing, man. All right, so last question is, where can people find out more about you and Bonifier?
All right, so you don't really need to find anything else out about me, but if you want to chat or get coffee, I drink lots of coffee. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have a very common name, but I somehow secured the like the LinkedIn name, like it's my name. It's not
impressive.
Ryan Scott 28. It's just me. So I don't know what their scheme is. It's like linkedin.com/in/Ryan Scott or something like that. Yeah, so I have that. But yeah, the more important thing is the website is bonifier.life. So that's BONIFIER.life. And if you're at all interested, you can sign up to be a beta tester, which would be awesome. And right now we're just looking for anybody to sign up. You don't need to have a child with any sort of disease at all, like just kids, right? Yeah. But yeah, that's probably the easiest way to reach us.
Nice. Anything else you want to add?
No, this was great. This was your first podcast, and I think it went well.
I think so. I don't know. There's still time for me to delete all the data.
Right. So you could totally screw this up. Yeah. Well, you still have to go write the jingle. So let's.
I do. I have to write the jingle.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm nervous.
No pressure.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, thanks so much for taking some time and telling the story. I mean, you've basically told me almost all this stuff before, so I appreciate you saying it again.
It's good practice.
Yeah.
I can still get much better at telling the story. So thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. All right, thanks.
All right, thanks.
So a little recap of the conversation that I just had with Ryan. First of all, just an amazing conversation every single time I talk to him. Anytime I talk to anybody that just cares that much about something, it's just, I don't know, it's a feeling that's sort of infectious, where you're like, I don't know, you need to do the things that you feel like you need to do. And even, afterwards, after we were done recording, we started talking a little bit more. I wish I had a recording still. But he was even saying that same idea, where it's like, he was saying, I feel like I'm doing exactly what I need to do today. Like, and then tomorrow he's going to feel like he's doing exactly what he needs to do that day. I think that's the something special of whenever you're super passionate about the project that you're working on, is that it kind of transcends a lot of feelings and time. There's just something special about working on something that you feel like you need to do. And again, me and Ryan have been friends for years now. He's spoke at Making Midwest, the first one that we had, which the next version is in, or the next iteration of Making Midwest is July 26th through the 28th at Columbus College of Art and Design. You go to makingmidwest.com. That's going to be my advertiser for this episode, we'll say. So that's all I got. I will see you soon. All right, bye.